Hi, everybody. My name is John DePietro, and it's a pleasure to welcome you here to this edition of My Life with Kenny Rogers. Now, the interesting part about this show, and the best part for you folks who are watching it, is that it's not my life with Kenny Rogers, but it's the life of our guest. And let me tell you this, we've got several of these installments that we're doing, all in celebration of Kenny's 55-plus year career. And what we want to do is give you the opportunity to see all of them. So down in the bottom right-hand side of your screen, there should be a little red button that says subscribe. So hit that subscribe button. Then a bell shows up. Hit the bell. And then every time a new segment comes out, you'll be the first to be notified. Let me tell you this. These are not available in stores, and they're available only through this great internet offer. Now, with that being said, our special guest is a guy who's on the stage, but not on the stage. Help me welcome, ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome Frank FARELL. Frank, welcome to the show about you.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I've seen some of your work, and of course I've known you for years, and I really appreciate you keeping Kenny's name out there and keeping it alive. It helps in a lot of ways because of the pandemic, we really didn't get a chance to have a send-off like what we anticipated.
Yep.
And we're still working towards doing something more special. Although some of the major networks did address it, it seemed a little bit, just part of the story rather than the whole story. So,
and in other news,
yes, exactly.
Yeah, and in other news, singer Kenny Rogers, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
But I'll bring it up right now, and then we'll explain where you fit in this whole picture here, as far as
Sure.
part of the Kenny Rogers entertainment family. Is that a lot of people don't have closure with Kenny's passing. Actually, two things. Number one, the passing from not being able to perform anymore, but still being alive. That's one segment. And then, when back in March when he passed on, so it is a weird feeling, though, is it not?
It's super weird. And it'll be a date I'll always hold. If you think about it, it's 3/20s, March, which is the third month, and then the 20th of 2020. So that's an easy way to remember.
3/20/20.
Yeah, 3/20/20. So, that's kind of leads into the way I work and what I did for him. My job wasn't to make music, but to make his music for him, because I work the monitors, which is the location of sound that is for the entertainers themselves, to allow them to hear themselves. And, and so I've talked about this before. There's a couple of ways of doing that. One is by what they've kind of let me free reign and know what they, kind of want, but let me just kind of adjust the levels of all the different people on stage. But it's only for what the entertainers are hearing, not for the audience. That was Keith Bugus's job.
At the other end.
Yeah, and the other style is where they say, I want just this, and leave it alone, and let it just be what it is. So that's kind of the two styles of doing monitors for someone. And Kenny was definitely of the first breed. And he allowed me some flexibility and allowed me the opportunity to stretch my own ideas of interpretations of songs, because quite honestly, when we would come back after he'd done an album, he didn't always want to do it verbatim. He, sometimes what's on an album doesn't translate to live. Maybe the tempo's too slow.
Yeah.
They concentrate on a lot of different things, especially in the early days when it had to be 3 minutes and 2 seconds or whatever, the criteria was to get the most airplays. And so we would take liberties, and sometimes I would do things to help out, like add some reverbs, and in the later years, we experimented with some backing tracks, and never his voice, though. That wasn't part of the deal. But we just wanted to enrich the sound with different things. I mean, it's not like we didn't have a big band anyhow, because he always had, 2 to 3 keyboard players, 2 guitar players, drums, and one of the keyboard players, Steve, doubled on lots of instruments. Everybody played a little bit. It's sort of like we always said in Kenny's job, you never had a job, you had a few jobs with Kenny. I even ended up driving the bus a few times, and I ended up playing drums. And
well, that's exactly right. And when we were talking with Edgar way back a couple weeks ago when we did one of these first installments, Edgar said that when he was being hired, Kenny told him that he was looking for people that could play more than one instrument or do more than one thing. So that's kind of been a Kenny Rogers trademark with the people that he's looked for.
I think you're right. And I think that comes out of his early years, seeing how important it was, probably in the Christy Minstrels is when that came, as a more of a variety act. And he saw the importance to the audience standpoint. You know, you look at somebody like Glenn Campbell, God rest his soul, or some of the artists that could just, you know, I don't know, I don't want to say it's Branson-ish, but it is kind of, because there is something about, let's say Prince, for example. I mean, he could grab about any instrument and outplay any of the players up there, or at least be at the level of, and these are A-list guys, that he was just a phenomenal guy, and the audience sees that, and having someone in the band that could grab something, it adds a new dynamic, it adds a new interest, something to spur, and it's sort of like, hey, look, that guy's, you know, playing a cowbell now or something, you know, it's just whatever, it's something unique.
Yeah. See, I still don't fully think that we've introduced what you do. You say the monitors, but you were the guy who was on stage but not visible generally. If it was an indoor theater, not visible to the audience. But when the guys in the band would go, they'd be looking over, saying, "Put my level up or down," or that type of thing. And it was an important job because how the band heard determined what the audience heard as well.
Sure, I had a lot of control, a lot of responsibility, and not only in the beginning, that's what my main focus was, and still always became a main focus was the audio. But later in years, I ended up doing a lot of other things, including some teleprompter duties as Kenny needed them, and video duties, in as much as helping set up projectors and setting up the different video aspects. So I got involved in overseeing the band gear from a technical side. It's kind of my forte is gear kind of speaks to me. I don't even have to look at the manual. I just, you know, it just talks to me and says, hey, you know, play with my buttons and I'll do some magic for you. And so I got to where I could help the guys out if they, mainly because of this, is that and this is how I got into this side of it. I used to be a musician full-time and had bands, and I was pretty much the leader of a lot of bands, or at least co-leader.
Okay, but Frank, I got to stop you.
Yes.
When you were in the band, did your hair look like that?
No, I've got some pictures that I won't share. That I look more like a poodle than I did anything else. Yeah, it was, well, you know, it was the 70s and 80s. In the 70s, I looked like a hippie, and in the 80s, I looked like a poodle with the curls and everything, and spandex, and I did what I had to make a living.
So not only it was a different color, it was a different style. Is that?
Yeah. It goes way back to when, it was something. I look back. Actually, when I went to work for the sound company, I had hair in the middle of my back, and my wife cut it off, and we put it in a case that was what you'd put a watch in, and that was kind of the last of the tail of me. And I've always had short hair because, from a practical sense, at least my hair, I can't go to sleep on a bus and wake up and look like I mean business, you know. So I'd cut my hair fairly short because that was part of our life. I mean, you're on a bus for a lot of hours, you know.
Your love for music has kept you in the business, not necessarily on stage, but you have filled in for Lynn, right, on drums on a couple.
Yeah, and Mike less than Lynn. Lynn was, of course, Lynn was the primary drummer throughout my career with Kenny, and then he retired. It's kind of funny. Most people, in fact, I can't think of anybody that quits Kenny. They all retire. Yeah, so that's how.
If they don't go to another band.
Yeah, you know, they either they retire or they change their career path a little bit. Edgar's kind of wanted to do more TV and stuff, and but it's really not quitters. It's not like, oh, you know, you made me mad, I'm leaving, you know. So in doing that, you become a serious family. In like Kenny, at some point I'd gotten so developed such a relationship with Kenny, especially in audio wise. For the most part, he could look over at me, not make any gestures. And I knew based on what he was doing with his microphone or how he was sounding, what he needed. And I could make those adjustments. And rarely, especially in the last 4 or 5 years, we didn't even have to, make contact unless we were talking about, the Cubs or something. It was more social from that standpoint than it was technical.
Yeah. You mentioned that people do different jobs, et cetera.
Yes.
But one thing that I've noticed with the gang after observing them for 35 years, it wasn't my plan. I didn't start out as a fan. I started out as doing business with Gerald Roy, selling them radio advertising, and then Dodge trucks and Dole and, the corporate sponsorship. So I'm making money on the show. But I became a fan. I mean, I knew nothing about country back in 81 or 82. But the thing I've noticed is that, and I've worked with other acts as well, from a radio station point of view, is that nobody really seems to have that family environment that the Kenny crew had. And that goes right from Kenny. I mean, there's not, again, they're working for Kenny. But it's not like there's the hierarchy with, the band looks down at the crew and the crew looks down at the riggers and the sound guys don't talk to the light guys. How did that we'll all help each other out environment exist or start?
Nepotism, mostly, I will have to say, because when I first joined up with Kenny, a lot of his family was involved. Yeah. And sometimes that's a bad thing, but in Kenny's situation, it was a good thing because Paul was involved, and Lenny and Tim. Now, Tim had already went on to other things, and they all did eventually. Paul worked for, Elton John. Lenny's worked with everybody, on a production level. So it was kind of a jumping off place for them, but that was part of it. And then Gene Royce brought in a lot of his family. And there's a big trust. So bringing family in is not a problem. So the trust factor is really, would you trust your brother to do something? Probably more than most people, because you know that you can count on them, and most times, some brothers or sisters aren't so cool, but most of them are good. And in the same way with drivers. So this business is, preparation meets opportunity. And in doing so, let's say we're out and a driver gets sick and you need a driver. Well, the first thing you're going to do is going to talk to your other drivers. Who do you know?
Who do you know?
And for Harry McClure or Danny, it's like, well, my brother drives. Oh, okay. Well, let's bring him out and try him out. And then, in the famous words of Ledford Herring,
Ledford, yeah.
Yeah, he'd say it fits the situation. And was the whole thing is it's like, I would say that attitude is probably 75% of this job. You have to be able to do the job, but nobody wants to work with a jerk.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care what you're in. And now remember, when you are at a regular 9 to 5, you go home and you can vent about the jerk. Now you're on the road, you're going to go to that bus and you're going to live with the jerk.
You bring that up. That was my next question to you, and I've got it written down here right now. Your day. Now, the general public may think they go to the show, they get there at 7:30, 7:45 for an 8 o'clock show. And when they get in the arena, you guys are in the back room finishing up dinner or something like that. And then a few minutes before the show starts, you all take your places, etc.
Yeah.
The show goes
way before that.
And the public, right. But
they have no idea. So you take a month and you prep the show. And so unlike a Christmas show or something.
Okay. Give me your day from, okay, let's do it this way. The show ends. It's 10:30 at night.
Yeah.
And goodbye, everybody. Islands in the Stream is over. See you again. People walk off the stage. The audience leaves. What do you do?
Usually I'm clearing the tears out of my eyes because I knew it was the last of the few shows that we had left. But because it always was emotional to me. The last song was Can't Make Old Friends. And that was one that showed a lot of us in our younger years. And so that always got me by a heartstring, it pulled at him very hard. But on a technical side, first thing I would do is, after the house music quit, shut down my gear and start preparing to put it in the truck. So I would kind of focus on that side. Luckily, I had some great techs along with me that would retrieve the microphones, and we get the delicate stuff first. So the guitar tech would grab the guitars, put them away. The drum tech would start taking mics off and putting the drums away. So everybody had a job, but so if you just kind of more globalize it, it would be, we'd take the first hour to hour and a half to strip the stage of the band gear and the delicate bits. And then that would get loaded up while we're putting those cases in the center of the stage to roll out to the truck. Then the lighting, Jeff Metter would prepare his cases to receive all the lights that are on the truss as they come in.
Yeah.
So in a normal show, you could figure it's going to be about 2.5 hours for the out. Depends on how much of the gear we're taking. And we'll see how this pandemic works in how it changes. There's a lot of things that acts at a certain point in their career, they can't afford to travel with as much gear, so they look for local production to take care of stuff. Even to ours, we would have local house PA most places. We didn't carry PA. On the rare occasions we would, but not after, we started playing so far distances and only doing one truck.
Yeah.
When I first went out, we were 4 trucks, sometimes 5. So it's, but that's a whole different thing. So after they're loaded, you can figure about 2.5 to 3 hours we're on the bus after showers and everything. And so then, you got to wind down, just like if you get off work, you're not just going to go to sleep.
Now it's 1:30.
Yeah, 12 to 1 o'clock.
Okay.
There's going to be a little bit of food left for you, whether it's pizza or something, just to kind of, because you just burn a lot of energy, which is probably the worst thing, is to eat before you go to bed. That's how we get that audio belly that we're all famous for. And then there, someone's going to have a adult beverage usually to kind of wind down, just as one might. It's just our day starts a little after yours, but it ends probably before most people. Have already went to bed. Ours is still going until 1 o'clock, and then we would get on a regular show. We'd come in about 9 o'clock to eat. On a Christmas show, which was a bigger production, it would be.
Hold on, you're missing one thing. You'd get on the bus, okay?
Yeah.
And drive 200, 300, 400 miles.
At times 6 and 7 back in the day. It just depends.
Sleeping on the bus.
Yeah.
And sometimes having to deal with somebody with music and, whatever the case.
Yeah, those guys go pretty quick. But
at the end, there was the party time was 20 years.
Yeah, you're talking about, when I worked for the Who, we'd do what we call dawn patrol, where we'd stay in the back lounge until about an hour before we had to start setting up.
Oh, but not even go to sleep.
Yeah, not even go to sleep. Dawn patrol. When dawn came up, then you were off patrol. And that was just a big party thing, but that was different too, because we were doing setup in a day, show day, tear down, and then a drive day to go into a setup day. So it was like every third day you had one show. Sure. You're talking stadiums. That's a whole different world.
Yeah. Well, and so with Kenny now, you drive 200, 300, 400 miles.
The driver would do it. We would not personally. Right. I've had to co-drive a little bit back in the days when, it was just too far. And before CDLs, actually, I would sit in the seat.
CDLs
taught me. And so, my first time driving across Canada, I got basically every surface you could drive on, clear down to dirt. I mean, we were playing some of these ice, and gravel, dirt, back roads, up hills. It's just crazy, all this stuff that.
So now
and you look back. Those are great memories too, because of it's sort of like this strife and all the things that happen that you kind of look at each other and go, God, I can't believe this happened. And then you look back, and that was your kind of best memories, because everything else was like, I don't remember catering in 1984 at some place so much, although I love food, but I'll remember, somebody did something crazy, or, and that's what you hold on to, is all those sillinesses.
Yeah. But, the thing is, when we were saying about the day, so now you're in the new, well, first of all, when people have a regular job, they'll work, quote unquote, 9 to 5. and then they will drive somewhere that called home, but they're not with the people that they worked with all day.
No,
Okay.
not usually.
You got
Unless
the
you work with your
situation
spouse
that
or something.
when you were physically done schlepping gear from a building, and many times, many times, I saw you guys having to load the buses and the trucks in raging snowstorms,
Okay.
especially during that Christmas show when they'd have you out from before Thanksgiving till December 23rd, right?
Yes, and sometimes we'd come back and do a few after the Christmas, just
Right,
because
in Las Vegas.
financially, yeah, you needed to do it. But you're right, and you got to and think about this. Okay, a bus is, you know, the width of it is. Everybody's seen a tour bus before, and the beds you have to be wide enough for you lay in. So you have 20, 24 inches hallway down the middle. You have bunks on either side, 12 bunks in a normal bus. So you're literally closer to the people you just worked with at night
than you were
like
during the day.
At the day, you were, you know, 100, 125 foot apart because of if you were working on the stage, the house is usually 100 foot out, 150 foot out. So, you know, you may see them at catering, but you're going to spend 8 hours 2 foot away snoring at each other, you know, having a snore off. Yeah. I mean, and you get to know people so intimately. It's a lot of times more than you want to, but you know whose feet stink. You know who's just had a baby. I mean, you live life as, you know, like what you might think about the Monkees or any other, you know, show that kind of had it like the Partridge Family or something, like it was a live-in thing. We're more on the crew side, more of a live-in commune than the bands. I mean, a lot of times bands will have their own bus each, not necessarily on Kenny's band's level, but on you know, where like the Eagles, where each guy is the star of that thing, where each one has equal billing.
Yeah.
So that's crazy.
For 1 second there, because I'm guessing that 99% of the time it was an all-male crew.
No, that it changed, and honestly, I'm glad to see. One of my close friends now, Michelle, who does sound with my current, you know, boss. After Kenny retired, I had to find someone that would take me, and Elvis Costello was looking, and it worked out really well. And Michelle is the front of house person, and she is part of the soundgirls.org, and they help you know, girls and ladies in the sound business and other things of production, but mostly sound. And so, and that started way back when. I mean, she's been a you know, advocate of that. But we had, when I first joined Clare Brothers in '88, there was one person, one lady that worked there. Out of all the rest were guys, but we always, well, not always, but we generally would have one female and sometimes two. Now, to contrast that, on this last tour that I did with Elvis in Europe, it was even. It was there were 16 people on the bus, because the coaches over there are you know, everybody's upstairs. It's a double decker, and they have 16 bunks, and we had 8 guys and 8 ladies, and it was that is unique. I would say it's a more male dominated, but I'd say it's a 75-25 now.
Well, the reason I brought that question up is poor Amber Randall,
a
young 20-year-old woman that had to deal with 6 or 7 guys that were already approaching geriatric stages of their life.
Almost, you know, something funny about that is Chuck Jacobs, who I know you've had on. He always, you know, not teasing, but it was true. It was kind of a realization. Is he had been with Kenny the same amount of years as Amber had been alive. So that, and it's nothing against her. She didn't have any choice of when she was born, but you know, it's just funny how that goes. And another thing, when I was touring with the Who, I was probably the youngest guy on the crew, and with Elvis, I'm the oldest guy on the crew now. And I guess I just didn't die, so that was it. But you know, if you stick around long enough, you're going to become the oldest guy. And so, and we're close. I mean, only a year or two older than some of the other guys, but I'm the same age as one of the Steve is the keyboard player for Elvis, and so Steve Naive. And so, and the band, their band's right in, you know, he was, his biggest hits was 70, 78, 79. That's the year I got married. So I was hearing some of his music at that time. So he's a contemporary with me. And he's a wonderful guy too.
Although Amber did marry up. She married one of your right?
Yeah, that was quite a fun thing because there was everybody was kind of wondering. They were trying to keep it real quiet, you know, because you really try not to, even in regular industries, you try not to have inner office romances, you know, because a lot of times this was good because they were both single, but a lot of times, you know, people go wandering and that, or some can. I guess that's a, you know, because.
Let's talk about that for a second.
But do you have anything to admit?
There are opportunities for extracurricular activity on the road because you're a traveling musician. Would you say that more so than if you worked in an office building?
I don't know because I haven't worked office buildings, but I would say there definitely, it depends on the type of tour. A young man or young woman can find relationships very easily. And there's the mystique of you're doing something. It's sort of like some ladies like the bad boys, you know, kind of scenario where they'll look for, you know, for the one that dad wouldn't like or whatever, just as either rebellion or that's just attracted to. And so you're kind of a pirate as you come to town, and you know, and so there's a mystique there. I could understand that. And there's a lot of in rock and roll, there's groupies that want to get to the band. They think this is, you know, one step closer towards their goal. So, you know, if you see some of the movies, I've witnessed some things, but you know, I don't want to kiss and tell because I never kissed. I've been propositioned once. A lady asked me, she said, you know, are you interested? I said, I'm married. She said, well, do you fool around? I said, not very well. And that kind of ended that. Because, you know, the thing is, I've always been very serious. My wife's a serious person too about it. This wasn't a vehicle for partying. This was a choice, a career. When I was in high school, you know, and you remember that they would have pictures of like, you better go to school or you're going to end up like this. And it was the guy that was working at the, you know, as a grease monkey at the local gas station.
Yeah.
And my counselor, when I went in there, because I wasn't very academically motivated at all. I think I probably passed 2 classes out of my whole 4 years of high school. But I self-taught myself once I was able to get out. But he said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I may go to college. I don't know. I'm into music a lot. And he said, I suggest you work at a foundry. And I said, what's a foundry? And he says, it's where you take metal and you make steel and you do these things. And he said, that's really what you've set yourself up for.
You lose your hearing by the time you're 40.
Yeah. And it's a tough life. It's like, you know, not, you know, and I thought, that's a little bit, you know, you're just looking at my record, but you're not looking at me. And so when my daughter was born many years later, I wanted to send her through Montessori school because I wanted her, that would have been perfect for me if it had existed back in those days, because the hands-on, that kind of individuality. Montessori, sorry.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, she didn't need to go to a Montessori, but that would have been interesting too. I was, you know, I was gonna.
How is she now?
She is 18 in about a week. So she's already got the car, and she's got onto a great start.
So I want to go back in a second, but
Sure.
now that we're on that topic, how difficult is it for the spouse, generally the wife, that is home raising the kids while you're gone virtually every weekend? A lot of times, major holidays, you're gone, where the other family member is being a mom and a dad.
It takes an extremely strong partner, probably more so than anything else, because you got to remember, they're not getting the glory. We're out there. We have fans in a secondarial stage, you know, doing this, Kenny, crew, So we're getting that adulation, that you know, happiness thrown at us, that they're at home dealing with a sick child or you know, going to the parent-teachers meeting without you, dealing with all the stuff. And then what do they get? A call back saying, oh, we had a great night.
Yeah.
How was yours? And then you get, you know, now, and the other side of that, because of course I have a lot of friends in the business, you know, you get home, there's a lot of times you get the keys to the child, as we used to call it.
The keys to the child.
You get the keys to the child. So you walk in the door, you've been, you know, you've probably flown maybe 6 or 8 hours, you're exhausted, you've done a tour, even though it's had a lot of fun things, and you're ready to take a little break. Here's the keys to the child. I'm going to go take a break. And you become Mr. Mom or Mr. Dad or whatever that is. I've tried to stay, luckily that's one of the things that kept me with Kenny for so many years, 29 years, off and on, is mostly on, was the fact that his work schedule worked around. I made, especially in her senior or more last 4-6 years of school, I was able to be part of that. Kenny slowed down a little bit, and that made sense. So being gone on the weekends isn't so bad, especially if you have a great child like Isabella, my daughter, and my wife's was amazing at taking care of it. And so, and that is reflected in my wife. So you hopefully, if you're lucky enough to love the person that has the same kind of drive, ambitions, and also attitudes towards raising a child, it will, you know, it'll come back into, you know, in a dividend that's amazing. We're seeing Bella's going to graduate high school with almost a associate's degree in college, because she's taking college courses at the same time. So, and that's a lot to do with her personality, but she mimics her mom. They're very smart. But she's also in band. She plays percussion. She plays marimba. She's went to state, got second in state with that. So she has both sides. I think she takes the best of both of us and then explains how we're both idiots.
Well, I remember you always would have pictures of her up on the soundboard. So when working, it kind of grounds you, right?
Oh, well, yeah, it was just like any proud father.
How old is she now? How old, you know, when you see baby pictures, then they're going to school, and now they're getting out of high school. The time
it's amazing. I'll tell you a quick little story about how this is, you know, the serpenticular kind of things, or the seventh stages of, whatever it is. It's so weird, because I grew up in a small town. 800 people at the time. It's about 300 now.
This is
the county.
Kansas City.
It's in Missouri, Schuyler County, Missouri. And so I was in bands, you know, in junior high and stuff. I was kind of like somewhat of a big fish in a small pond, because I learned to play drums and music quite young, and it came easy to me. So I was like the default drummer. There was only a few, and you had to drive 20 miles just to play a gig. But the county would always put on a event at they're called Old Settlers. And it was, you know, they'd usually a country artist, and they would have the bands come through, the marching bands come through, and parades and things. This is, you know, in the 70s. So 75, I'm 14 years old, and they decided to put on a version of a popular TV show called Hee Haw. And my uncle played guitar, and he had bands and his friends, and so they picked everybody to mimic that. Well, they picked me to do a guy named. They picked me to do Kenny Rogers.
Oh, Kenny! Oh, Kenny!
Isn't that amazing?
Did you have?
I'd never heard. No, I didn't. I was a kid, man, and so I'd never even heard his music. You know, I you know, probably heard Just Dropped In, but I don't know. You know, it was just, I was an AM radio guy because I was just a kid. I didn't know, you know, it was like Build Me Up Buttercup and stuff like that was going on. Maybe Led Zeppelin had started, Led Zeppelin 1 or 2 or something like that. You know, I'd listened to a little bit of the underground radio from my brother. But anyhow, so I played Kenny, and I did Ruby Don't Take Your Love to Town. And the lady that was putting it on, that was kind of the producer of the show, a lot like Kelly Younkerman, who you probably have had on or will have on, she had got a bunch of kids, probably 2 or 3 years younger than I, maybe some older, and staged it like a colonel from Elvis in the front row. So when I got up to sing this, all these girls start screaming, you know, my name, and it was quite a thing. I almost forgot the words. So it was.
And you're Kenny.
And I was, yeah, but it wasn't a dress up kind of thing like that.
Oh,
It was just, I was singing his songs. And so like, here's the guy that's going to do the Kenny Rogers thing. And and this was before he had the big hits. It was when he was on Hee Haw as a guest with Mary Ann, you know, being there, but he was just doing some of his older stuff from the first edition. Exactly. So it was because it was 75. So it was like Ruby was a fairly big hit, and he may have still been in the first edition. I'm not sure. So I did that, and that was so that was my first. Another thing that's
Kenny did Kenny ever know that story?
Yeah, I told him, and it's sort of like it was cool because Kenny and I had a good relationship. But it was you can imagine how many people came up to him with like, oh, you won't believe we played Lady at our wedding. It's like. There's a lot of, there's one of him and there's a lot of people that he touched. And he never was, bad about it. He didn't want to downplay it. But it was, there's always somebody that's going to have something like that. But that was, and I'll tell you another little thing in that same regard. So before I went to work for Kenny, after I'd done bands and everything, and I decided to get away from that because I was becoming such a technician and I just didn't enjoy trying to be a technician and a musician at the same time. That you can't serve two masters in that regard. So I went to work for Clair Brothers, the largest sound company in the world at the time, and I was lucky enough to be on the Who tour in that time frame, which was a huge, world tour, stadium and everything.
One of their many farewell tours.
Well, it was not even a farewell. It was before that. It was a big one, and it's the same year as the Steel Wheels for the Stones. It's the same production people. Yeah. So that gives you an idea. And so I do this world tour, selling out stadiums, 60, 70,000 people all around the world. But my parents weren't sure if this was going to work out for me. But after that ended, I went to work for Kenny, and then they knew that I would be okay. And Kenny wasn't we were doing the Kenny and Dolly stuff, which was arenas, and we were selling quite good, and it was quite big, but it wasn't a stadium tour. Yeah. He had done stadiums, earlier, but it was, and so it's so funny to think back on that, how their perception of what they felt is good. It's sort of like ice cream at that point. You go to an ice cream shop and someone says, oh, this, Tutti Frutti is the best thing in the world. Another person says, yeah, but the double duck chocolate is the deal. And it's like, yeah, but this is all opinion. It's in the eye of the taster. And that's the same way, but they knew Kenny. And I don't know how they knew it, but they realized he was going to have a career for such a long time that as long as I stuck it out, and we're stick to it people, Yeah. I left him for about a year and a half or so to go to work for Steve Miller. And, but then there was something that happened and he needed somebody back, and my time with Miller ended. And so I came right back and stayed ever after that.
Yeah, so it's always interesting to hear the backstories as to how people got to where they're going. You had to work, generally when you're doing what you do, you're dealing with some egos that are on stage. Even if they're not the headliner, there could be some egos. That didn't seem to be the case with this group of musicians at all, did it?
No. I don't think so. I think when you get to the well-grounded, it's amazing to me. There's some exceptions. I've worked for jerks. I don't need to say who, but not for very long. But Kenny had a philosophy. He would say that I'll give the tools to you that you need, and then I'll let you do your job. And that was, I'll provide the tools. He didn't want to micromanage. He wanted a status report of things that he wanted to accomplish, but he just wanted things accomplished. And he didn't, you knew better than to say, well, I didn't like that song you did here. I mean, there was no reason to do anything silly like that because, once again, opinion stuff, unless he's asking for my opinion, there was no reason to come out with something that I thought would be hurtful. I wouldn't do that to anybody, even people I don't care for. I wouldn't, intentionally say something I thought would cause harm. But there's not any ego-ness to that. I think there's a standoffishness because there is a competitive side to music. If you think about it, especially in the early days, if you're going to become number one, whoever is number one is going to become number two in the charts. So there is a competitiveness to it. You try to do it in a friendly way, and you let the fans decide more than you do things to create that. You just put out your best foot, and then hopefully someone will like the shoes you're wearing. You know, it's not so much. But there's some people that, you know, do some downright crafty stuff. You know, I've seen that before in the business where maybe, you know, someone's starting out and then somebody else will do something to, let's say they'll bring in a tour into that town that you're in, so it takes away the money, so you're not going to get any attendance. You know, that there's some crafty stuff that has happened, but for the most part, Kenny's group never had egos that I ever saw. You know, they knew where they were at. Everybody knew there. Kenny liked to kind of say it was a flat line, and then Kenny was above it. You know what I mean? In other words, there wasn't a pyramid of crews at the very bottom and stuff like that. And Gene Roy, the tour manager, and everybody felt that way. You know, and I you know, I love my drivers. You know, everybody had a job to do, and if someone didn't do their job, it was just as important as someone else. Now, having said that, there's scale. You know, there's a lot of drivers. You know, there's only one that really, or two that I really liked that drove me to where I could sleep. But there's a lot of drivers. So when you have that kind of availability, it doesn't drive the price, you know, for what they can get, because it's kind of set in stone. Whereas if you have somebody like a musician that plays a certain way and you want them on the album, that uniqueness makes them more valuable. And the same way in our jobs, you know, if Kenny, if other people couldn't understand where Kenny was coming from and make him sound like he needed, that they wouldn't be as valuable to him financially or just in the situation. And that takes time. And I can tell you from experience, because I've done this before, if you do something to lose the respect of the person you're working for, especially an entertainer, you might as well put in your resignation, because you never regain that.
You're going.
You never do. They see you in a certain light. That's probably what happened with me and Steve Miller, is they only see you in a certain way, whether it's weak or whether the person that couldn't do what I needed done. And so you have to be very careful of that relationship. I try not to over sell myself. I say, here's what I can do to help you out. Here's what I think, but I don't want to go beyond that. And then I try to put out 110% every time to, you know, that's my philosophy.
Yeah. So basically you see every show, every minute of every show.
Yeah. If he's on, I think there's a couple of songs where it would go into a pretty, Fine Time to Leave Me Lucille. In later life, because I knew nothing was going to happen in that song for the most part. So as I got older, my bladder would fill, you know, so I would have my assistant watch over the desk while I'd run to the back and go to the bathroom. So that's about the only time. But I pretty much knew how the story was going to end on Lucille. So that by the time, having heard it for, you know, 20 some years before that.
Yeah, you knew the time. You knew the time because we started talking and then stopped. So just get back to that briefly. So you get into the building at 9 in the morning or 8 in the morning, and depending upon how big the show was, you're rigging and putting it together till what, 3, 4 in the afternoon?
Yeah, by 4 o'clock you do, in a regular thing, you'd have a sound check or whatever. Our band got so used to us being everything. All I asked was they come in and check their gear, because I couldn't know, I could know it worked, but I didn't know if it worked the way they wanted it to. So I just asked everybody to listen to their gear, and of course to check for any idiot things that I may have not done. If they say, oh, this isn't working, then I go, oh shoot, I forgot to patch something. Or whatever.
4 o'clock, it's either summertime and like coming to the Cape, you know, coming to Cape Cod or Cohasset.
Oh, I love that.
Setting up in that 100-degree under the heat. You're sweating like pigs. You get to take showers, right? And
once in a while.
Grab something to eat, but then at 7:30 or 7:30, you're back behind.
Yeah, and you got to remember, it depends on the situation. A lot of times we'd have an opening act, and Keith and I would have to be down there setting up the opening act. So sometimes.
And Kenny would do a 3 and a 7.
Oh yeah, there was three bangers before, and if they had band gear, you had to be there. And if you're the person on call, so when you're finished with Kenny, Now you set up the other act, and then you set their sound, and then you set up the other act, you set their sound. So if you got a half hour to eat, a lot of times I had a plate delivered to me at the desk.
At the desk.
Yeah, and because it depends on the show. And here's the thing, we didn't get paid any more for those. That was just part of the show. You know, when I was an employee of Claire Brothers and I was a sub, sometimes there would be, you know, a negotiated rate for if we were going to do extra work, we'd get extra pay. But when I became a Kenny employee, it was like, not quite salary, but like salary, that we knew kind of what we were going to make. And some days are going to be super easy and some days aren't. And you just have to take it, you know, with strides, what's going to happen.
Yeah. Now, day off. You're on the road, day off. What goes on with you guys?
I look for, you know, I love food, and Chuck, the bass player, and I, we had a lot of commonality. So, you know, when I first joined up, I was seriously into tech and stuff at different ways. And he had tried to be into tech and was to some degree. And I helped him, and we both hit it off in those kind of terms. And Warren and I used to hang some too, because Rick Harper, who was a guitar player before Brian Franklin, he was into stock markets and things because he was kind of closing in on retirement. And so he and I would go through and, you know, and he taught me some things about stocks and investment. And between him and a few other people, that's, you know, that was really good lessons of life on how things work. So we would hang out in those regards. I'm not a drinker. You know, I never really was. My grandfather, I would say, liked alcohol more than he should have. And so I kind of picked up on that. I never really was a big guy into extracurricular stuff either, as far as drugs or whatever, because I didn't see any value there. I didn't need to escape anything. I was pretty much in control of what I wanted to see. And so I wasn't looking for the bar. I liked entertainment. We used to go do stuff. Like when I was on the Who tour, we went and trap shoot or skeet, you know. So I went with some of the English guys because they don't get guns over there. So we went out and shot shotguns and those kind of things. With our group, we'd go see movies sometimes. And, you know, it's funny in that same regard. So we started going to see movies. And in the interim, pretty much everybody was able to get a senior discount by the time we had retired. In fact, I remember when I got my first
you had to go at 2 in
LARP.
the afternoon, right?
Yeah, well, sometimes, but you know, sometimes it depends on where you're at. In the smaller towns, they do it all the time. And then we would end up going to restaurants like Denny's or something because it was closed, and they had like a special. You know, if you're over 50, you get coffee for a quarter. And we started taking, you know, taking advantage of that. But I mean, what are you going to do?
You know, it's funny. You mentioned the restaurants, and the other night we were up in Maine, and we were with another couple, and they said, "How about Indian food?" And I said, "I'm not going to an Indian restaurant unless I have Chuck with me." Chuck, I said, the only place I've ever been Indian food is Chuck, and he says, "Okay, this is naan and this is marsala."
Exactly. Yeah. Anyway, Chuck and I are big fans
of Indian restaurant until I have Chuck Jacobs with me to tell me what the heck I can order. I
actually have a Kenny story in that regard. He went out with somebody, and he knew how much I'm into those foods too, because I went with Indian to him. And Kenny, when we'd go somewhere, like I did an audio book with him where I stayed at his house, and we did it. I actually put him in a closet, and he would with a microphone, and he did an audio book that was like 6 or 7 hours long. And I'm recording him, and you know, every once in a while I'd let him out of the closet. But we would go out to eat and stuff. So if we went to a Chinese restaurant, he would order 4 or 5 main courses just so we had something like a buffet, because he liked that kind of, you know, he wanted high quality, but he wanted a lot of different things around him to try. So he was at a Indian restaurant with somebody else, and I got this text from him that goes, "Hey, I'm at an Indian restaurant. What do I want to order?" Somewhere I still have that text where I sent him back. Okay, I said, if you want this, do this. If you want this, do this. Because, you know, any of the Asian kind of stuff, Indian and Thai and all that stuff, it's, I grew up in a meat and potatoes kind of town. And when I left there, my grandfather was a butcher for 52 years. That's probably why he drank. And so when I left that town, you know, to me, Chinese came in a can, and it was chop suey. And my mom made it because she saw a picture of it in some Women's Day magazine in the 60s. And it was great for mother-made Chinese, but it was not Chinese food. So when I got out in the world, man, it was, you know, oh my God, there's a whole palette of edible choices here. And so I really went off and I was telling you about the Who that I was in there. We did a Tommy show there, and we were like, I was in London for a month and with rehearsals and everything. And that was during the mad cow disease, and everybody was watching the, you know, don't eat beef because of, you know, this may happen or that, I don't know. So anyhow, I kind of, and I had some stomach troubles, you know, you get, it was nerves, it turns out. But so I stopped eating red meat, and that was 80, 89. I was there, and that's the last time I ate red meat was then. So I eat chicken, I eat fish, you know, sushi, all that stuff, but I just don't eat anything with a hoof. I guess it's the easiest way.
That's the way to look
So that's where I got into it, because, you know, in England, Indian food is like Mexican food over here. I mean, it's what they brought back when they borrowed the Indian culture and put it in their museum, along with the Egyptians and everybody else. They brought that back, and they, you know, I guess they would say domesticated it. They made it creamy and, you know, heavy sauces and stuff. So I really got into the Indian and Thai there. And Chuck and I, we would seek out those places. And we stayed at Chelsea once in this place called the Blue Spice. Probably my veins are still clogged from that experience, but it was amazing, amazing. So, and then, you know what? Some of the things that happened over the years in that regard, we were at that Chelsea area at the hotel, which was right next to this soccer stadium. So they'd have a match. I don't know if you know about English soccer, but oh my God, their fans are amazingly gruff. When they come out, if they've lost, they're ready to get down with a fight with anybody that says something about it. So it was, and we're standing there, staying in that hotel, so we were kind of like staying in. But we've gotten to see a lot of really amazing things through our time with Kenny, from, you know, Africa, north and south, to Australia 6-8 times. And, you know, we were taken to cricket matches where, you know, some people would die to have seen that match, and it was just like, oh yeah, we were there. Yeah. You know, and it's, you know,
no. Were you
just one of those things.
How about in Atlanta when the bombing, the Olympics, the Richard Jewell movie, and there's depiction in it that you were there the night before the bomb went off.
We were. Yeah, what happened there? It was at front of house. Keith was there. The PA was the old Grateful Dead PA, and I was on stage, of course, and set up for that. And Keith was out in the house. And we had a good night. Everything was fine. And then the next day, I don't know what time, that thing detonated, and it would have killed Keith. It could have. Okay. It was at the front of house area. And so, you know, it's crazy too. I believe that was the time that Mrs. Clinton, the president's at the time, wife, came to see Kenny, because we had our stuff staged outside of there, and she was going to be there for something, probably talking. And all the Secret Service and everything had dogs come in and smell our stuff. And I was thinking, oh my God, you know, they're going to get high. But it turned out okay. They were just making sure it was safe for her. And she came back and shook everybody's hands, and some of the band washed their hands afterwards. I will tell you that. Some of them aren't big fans. That's just their own thing. But it was, you know, I look back on some of the things that I got to do with Kenny, and, you know, I met 2 or 3 5-star generals, you know, of course he met everybody, but I'm thinking about a guy from a town of 800 people growing up, you know, and all the things that I've gotten to do, mostly because of Kenny. For instance, the first time I played drums for Kenny, we were at the Fox Theater in Detroit. Detroit. And Lynn had either gotten something that it made him ill. I think it was the story I always told, which I'm not positive. I thought was some bad mayo on some tuna fish. And I heard that he fell off the toilet and twisted his ankle or something like that. He was like passed out. Huh?
Lynn?
Sorry. Lynn Hammond. Yes.
Yeah, okay, Lynn. Okay.
And so, and I'd been with Kenny for like 2 years. Now that story may not be correct.
We're talking to Lynn. I'm talking to Lynn's on tomorrow morning. So I'll
Really?
have to ask him that.
Ask him about that to see what it was that happened, because you know that's been so long ago that it kind of morphed itself. But they, you know, they really didn't know I played so much, but there was no time to bring anybody up, and so they didn't want to cancel the show. And I think Colin Ray was on with us or somebody like that, and they asked his drummer, and he said, "I'm not playing with Kenny." He was, you know, he was a straight country drummer, and he had heard the show, and this was the Christmas show, so it was somewhat involved. It wasn't just like boom cha boom cha boom cha. There was some up stuff, and it was all some of it was to tracks with clicks and stuff. And I said, well, I think I can do it. I'll help out if I can. So they sent Chuck over, and Chuck basically rehearsed me, and he did the sign off on it. And so it was pretty wild. So you know, I have it written down somewhere because I had to tell this story once before, and I was, but anyhow, so we came up. I mixed the opening act, I believe, went back, rehearsed a little bit with Kenny, went out front, did the show, and Kenny was so gracious. He you know, he introduces everybody, and after the end of it, I went back with the bands to change clothes because I was wearing some of Len's, you know, shirt or something. And he's a lot bigger guy than I am, height-wise, so some of it was a little baggy on me. So I'm out of there, and then Kenny walks in smiling, and I go, my first words to him was, "Remember me?" Like that, because he'd only see me at the house there, and at that time I wasn't even running monitors. I was just a system tech for Keith. So I would, you know, I'd set up the PA we were carrying at the time and go back and help Keith. I'll either mix the opening act or make sure the system sounded right. But Andy Satil was on monitors, God rest his soul. And so Kenny came up and he said, well, he said, I never even realized Len was gone halfway through the show.
Len didn't want to hear that.
Well, it was a testament because I used to play a lot. I had played quite a bit. So, I mean, I'd done some stuff. I'm not God's gift, but I could play. But I just hadn't done it for a year or two. But most of my stuff was more, I played country a little bit, but mostly more rock and metal. So I had an endurance so I could get through the show, and I steadied time. But back then we didn't have a click all the time. And Chuck had clued me in because Chuck comes from a jazz background and funk and different things, show bands. And so he'd say, if Kenny starts patting his leg in double time, that means speed up. He's feeling it faster. So those are the clues and cues. And as a monitor guy, you know those things. So Chuck helped me through. And if I was dragging a little bit, Chuck would kind of like, come on, let's go, man, let's go. And so everything felt rushed and pushed to me. But that's what Kenny wanted because he wanted that feel for the show. He wanted to bring it up. Later, when we got into tracks, it settled him down a bit because he knew it wasn't Len was feeling it differently or you know, he knew that he could count on it, and the tracks were just a click a lot of times. It was just, okay, this is 122 beats per minute. That's where it's going to be. And then they would play around it a little bit, you know, kind of push ahead or push back. But anyhow, that was, so that's the first time. And Kenny said, it sounds fine. Len was out. He let me finish the rest of the tour. Now, that was, what, a week, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, until Len was back. And he said, you know, if you feel like you could do it, you're welcome to do it. Now, he could have made one phone call and had an A player right up there to cover that thing. But he saw what it did for me, you know, it gave me something.
Well, hey,
and so,
if it didn't happen, you wouldn't have that to talk about today with me.
Exactly. But also, I mean, he knew coming from humble beginnings where he came from too, that just that little bit of boost, even though I didn't continue on drumming or anything, you know, it just the boost of, you know, you're in the ball game. You're able to play with the big guys.
Yeah.
Even if you're just able to sit at the bench, you're sitting at the bench with, you know, Hank Aaron. You know what I'm saying? So you're in the game.
Yep.
And for someone to do that, I mean, I still look back and raise a tear in my eye. That was so loving of him to do that for me.
Well, let me ask you one final question, because you know the greatest part about this interview is that you've pretty much answered on your own the questions that I was going to ask. So I said this is a great one. What will you take from Kenny with you to all the other things that you do? What are the traits? What are the principles? What are the guiding theories that you'll go by that you're going to take, that you've already taken with Elvis, but will continue to take with you?
I think that the most important thing is to be open to ideas of what people are trying to bring. Try to really listen and understand what someone is wanting and how you might be able to help them achieve that. I used to say as kind of a knee-jerk slogan is, mine is not to reason why, but to simply amplify. And that's really, but that's not really the case as later on. Especially, I kind of, after playing drums with him, I became what we used to call the fifth Beatle. You know, I would be in the rehearsal and the band, they had, for the most part, we started getting newer guys and didn't know my history. But I had made my bones enough that they really appreciated my input. And I tried not to overstep that, but I was always there trying to help out. And sometimes I may have gotten in the road when there was something sort of political, you know, somebody was trying to make something happen a certain way, and maybe I didn't understand that. But the most thing is I would take away is from him was the ability to make everybody comfortable, and I try to do that. And I try to be very supportive of people, and I try to listen to what they're trying to do and try to achieve that. And sometimes I fall short of that mark, you know, but for the most part, that's what I
know that is something that you want to shoot for. That's pretty good.
Yes, that's the main thing.
We want to thank you so much for spending your valuable time with us to tell us your backstories. And the backstories are fascinating. And, you know, everybody loves to hear about, you know, it's kind of like, where were they before they were rock stars, that kind of thing. Well, you know, at least with the Kenny Rogers entertainment family, everybody who's on that bus or on that plane or driving that truck is all playing a very important part in the overall success of that act. And where else can you find somebody who's gotten 60, 55, 60 years out of a career, always at the top, always respected, and you know what? But the thing we're finding is that the number of people that he's influenced during this time period is rather significant. I'm sure you'd agree.
Oh, absolutely. Well, like I would say, backstories are like mothers. You either are one or you have one.
On that note, I think we'll go out in a blaze of glory and tell people if you like this to hit the button down in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, and then hit the bell. You'll be notified every time a new one comes out. And we look forward to seeing you again real soon. Frank Farrell, have a good day.
Thank you.